modesty is a trigger word for a lot of people. I also think modesty is so closely identified with the church, and I think people have expectations when they see that. But there are clothing lines in Utah where it's like, if you were not Mormon, you would not step foot in there.
Oh, for
Let's
sure.
be honest. I just could not imagine in a million years even like noticing what someone else is wearing at church. I don't even think I pay attention. So I think sometimes you find what you're looking for. So if you're looking for people not wearing their garments, you'll definitely find them.
Welcome to the Third Hour podcast, where we talk about church culture and real topics within the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, like modest fashion. My name is Mimi Bascom, and I'm joined, like always, by my husband, Eric.
Hey, guys.
And we have a very special guest today. It is Mykel Morris, the queen, the content creator, the clothing brand creator. Welcome.
You're so nice. Thank you.
We're so excited to have you.
I'm excited too. Thanks so much for having me.
Of course. So Mykel is a photographer, content creator. You're working on launching a conservative clothing brand. So, so exciting.
Pretty much just do everything on Instagram there is, huh?
Yeah. And I used to be an influencer. I'm an ex-influencer now, but I also,
Interesting. We'll have to get
I've
into
just
that.
tried everything, I guess.
And she's also a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Recent wife, right?
Yeah.
When did you get married again?
We got married in May 23rd. So
okay.
recent.
Congrats.
Like almost 4 months, yeah.
Oh my gosh, yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
How's it
So
going?
far, so
far,
good.
yeah.
Yeah, my husband and I will joke, we're like, all right, so far so good. Everything's good.
There you go. A
Because
couple
you hear
months
so
down.
much, you always hear things where it's like the first year of marriage is so hard, or all these different things.
Yeah.
And so I feel like there's always this like unknown,
You're
but
scared something's coming.
yes,
Well, it's not bad yet, so pretty soon.
But so
Literally.
far so good. I think we get along really well. I honestly think, I always say it depends on who you marry. Like I think if you marry someone that's like super chaotic, then probably the first year of marriage is super chaotic. But
Yeah.
I married someone that's very calm and very, I'm probably the chaotic one, but very mellow. So I feel like it's mellow. It's just how it, so
But,
far
you
so
said
good.
So
you haven't
great.
changed your last name yet, so you're kind of just holding out just in case
Yeah.
it does get bad, right? You're like, I could always just back out.
That is
Still got
often
my
a
name.
conversation. He's like, so when are we changing the last name? I'm like, it's legitimately, it is the paperwork that I don't want to do. You have to change everything. Plus the business is in my name. So then you have to change all the paperwork. There's so many legalities to it that you don't even know about.
Oh,
I mean, it took
yeah.
Mimi time. How long did it take us?
A long time.
Oh, okay. That makes
It
me feel
was-
better. Because
oh,
I
yeah.
feel like it's like, people are like, oh, why are you changing it? And I'm like, because it's so much paperwork.
Yeah.
So
Right.
that makes me feel better.
Like you're busy. You're fine. Like you
Yeah.
have a whole brand that you're working on. So
Of my name, yeah.
You're fine.
Yeah. How long did it take you to change yours?
It probably
I
like
was trying to remember.
probably like a year until I like got all the documents and everything
she
back.
started.
It was a
at
long
one-
time.
So like she changed. I feel like your license got done first, but like
There's
the
an
Social
order you have
Security
to
card
go
took a while.
through.
Like she like did one and then like waited on the next stuff. 'Cause
My passport is still my maiden name because I didn't
Oh.
get my new passport yet.
hopefully
Yeah.
the IRS is not watching. They're, like,
Yeah.
coming after you.
I know
now.
we did go to
Yeah.
Mexico.
I was
Sorry,
just
should
gonna
I be
ask, have you
admitting, is this
traveled?
illegal? Probably
I don't
illegal.
think it is.
But we went to Mexico and I had my maiden name, so I just did my flight and stuff in my maiden name.
Should've
But
made
I
tickets and
felt
asked your
like
passport.
yeah, but I felt
If they
like
asked for a license, then
Elizabeth
should've been-
Holmes,
yeah.
like a con artist. I was like, they
I
are
love
like
that.
gonna catch me. It was crazy.
Yeah, well, that's what I was wondering because, like I said, I go home pretty much once a month. So I'm
Yeah.
like, if I change it, like, what's the window of how I? That's why I just
Just use your maiden name in the meantime, and then until you get.
Make
That's
sure
what I would
Your
do.
ticket
but-
matches your ID for when
Yeah.
you
so I
fly.
can book the flight under any name I want.
Basically, as long as you have an ID that matches. So if you get like a fake ID,
fake
you
ID.
can just change your name.
I
it's all
love the
good.
start to this LDS
Oh yeah,
podcast.
everyone is like taking
Pro
notes.
tips.
I know. Or like how to con things when you're
Right,
traveling.
exactly.
I love
What
that.
Jesus would do.
Yeah,
Like, yeah.
truly.
I mean, he wasn't checking in at customs. He was just going around
Do you
traveling.
ever think about that? Okay, quick side note. Do you ever think about like if he was in like right now if he was here?
Yeah.
Would he travel first class? Would he travel on Spirit?
Yeah, would he be walking across the ocean?
What would his
You
driver's
mean
license?
Spirit Airlines,
Yeah,
or like
like-
you mean like Spirit? just
Spirit
like
Airlines.
getting
Would that be
Oh,
his airline?
oh my gosh, I thought you were literally saying
Well,
like
I
through
was,
the
but then
Spirit.
now
Oh.
I'm thinking that works. Or like, what would his ID look like? What like?
Oh my
I
gosh,
just
his
have
ID
so many-
picture. What would he wear? Would he wear shoes?
My biggest question in fashion is what would he wear?
Yeah.
Because he would not wear robes,
Right.
Or would he?
I
I
think
think he just wore normal clothes for the time.
Would he wear a
so-
suit? What fashion line?
he must.
Would he shop?
Would he shave his
suit.
beard?
Would he shop fast fashion or
Not
wholesome-
fast fashion.
He'd be making his own clothes.
How much money would he be spending? Like, I have so many logistical questions about modern day. I mean, obviously he is modern day, but like, if he were truly in our society now, would he have an iPhone? Would he text people?
Yeah.
These are legit questions.
Real questions.
That I have, that I oftentimes...
There you go.
I asked my husband, I'm like, would he go to Sodalicious? That's God's soda.
Like, what would he get?
We don't have any record of him going to restaurants even back then, though.
That's true.
But he was like well liked by dinner, people.
So, like, you know,
would he have a sleep number bed?
I don't know if he had a bed.
That's what I'm saying.
He's like, bouncing around houses.
Like,
you know?
what would he be like now?
He's gonna have a bed. I'd say purple.
He was just staying at people's guest
purple
house,
mattress.
You know?
I think he'd have his
would
own
he have
place.
endorsements?
Endorsements?
Like, would he be
He's got his own Instagram, getting
gosh.
brand deals.
like Deseret Book.
Yes. Well, I have these thoughts where I'm like, because if he existed, he would have to be some form of, he'd have to have a passport or a driver. Like, there had to be some type of ID. But fashion is my main thing. Like, I'm like, where would he shop?
Yeah.
What would he wear? Truly.
Would he have definitely a sense of style? Mykel.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Well, I mean, like, women's clothing, obviously.
There you go.
I'm sure he does women. Well, maybe not that. I could see him wearing maybe
Down
DI.
East. Does Down East have men's clothes?
Oh, I don't know.
So,
you don't think he's going to be wearing like the little crochet things that the widows are making? You know what I mean? They'll be like, Jesus, here, I made you this vest.
There you go.
And it's like hideous. Homemade stuff.
People in the ward.
I just wonder that all the time. And like, how much money would he
be spending?
Yeah.
See, I'm glad you brought this up because I've never thought about this.
I think about this every day. I'm not kidding.
Every time she makes a piece of clothing, she's like, would he wear this if he was a girl?
My husband will attest. I will be like, what would he... My husband hates hypotheticals, but I live in hypothetical. I thrive. I live. Everything is a hypothetical situation for me.
Wow.
And so I'm always like, what would he eat? Would he be eating? Would he drink soda? I mean, I feel like he wouldn't. But I also, like, the apostles drink soda. The prophet drinks soda. So I think about, what does the prophet do? And that's probably the closest thing Christ would be doing. But I'm like, they've attested to drinking Dr. Pepper.
Oh, yeah. So. Isn't Elder Uchtdorf like Diet Coke fan?
Yeah, Diet Coke.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's one of my things. I have so many questions about modern day. Like, if he were to live in society, what would his driver's license look like?
Yeah.
He was a carpenter then. Would he be a carpenter now? Oh. Would he be sponsored by people? Would he be on a podcast?
Yeah. No, and you're taking what would Jesus do to the next level.
Truly,
and I'm
like, would he have social media? A cell phone? Would he take photos?
Gosh. What would be on his Instagram story?
Yes. I literally think
okay, this is actually blowing my mind.
Because it's just so disconnected. Like,
yeah.
But he exists now. He's real. And so it's like, I just think part of me is like, maybe that's just why he wasn't on Earth at this time.
Too many questions to answer. He's like, dude, I gotta go back.
He's like, I have to be there when there's like no
simpler times.
Think about how he wasn't there. Like I assume sort of chose to not be here during social media.
Yeah, I mean, people have videos of him like, yo, did you see? Just like multiply that bread?
Yes.
I saw that on TikTok.
So I just think about like, is there a reason he chose not to be here?
I'm sure there is.
Social media.
Yeah. That is so interesting.
But I'm also like, but we have to be here. So we need guidance. No. But there is so much in the church that is kind of a, not gray, but like cell phones. It's like, okay, that's not bad. But then it's like, okay, would Christ just like text people? Would he use maps? But he knows everything.
FaceTime only.
Would he FaceTime?
That's all he would do.
Yeah. Would he do sermons via lives?
Oh my gosh.
I seriously.
People are like in the chat, like, huge W for Jesus.
Like, I truly am like, I don't know. I think about this like almost on a daily basis. I think about this.
Okay, he just has to come in our lifetime so we get these answers.
Yes.
Like, I can't wait.
That's the other side of it, right? Second coming then.
Yeah.
Well, second coming's going to be different, right? Because he's like here to rule.
But still, would he have a phone?
That's the main question, is the technology. Like, how much would he be involved?
Totally.
Yeah. President Nelson has a phone. I just like imagine having Jesus as a contact in your phone.
And like everyone must have his number, right?
Is it just
like, or is it exclusive?
No, it's like, remember Facebook, Tom on Facebook, where it was like everyone was his friend?
Yes.
What if it's like Christ, like everyone just has him as a contact in their phones?
Oh my gosh. And you can just like reach out.
Yeah.
And he's like, sorry, actually, I can't answer.
Do not disturb is on.
I'm in a meeting.
Or it's like I'm driving with do not disturb on my phone. I know.
My gosh.
You probably did not expect to think about this
I
today.
was so not expecting it, but I'm so glad that we talked about this. Mm-hmm. So thank you.
Me as well. I'm thrilled that now someone has the same questions I do. Because my husband's just like, I don't know. And I'm like, but he's like, I don't know. He always says, he's like, I don't know. And I'm like, but what? And he's
but
like,
what if? And he's like, but what if I don't care?
And I know. I live in hypotheticals. I'm always like, what if? And he's like, I'm not going to know the answer to this.
Well, anytime, call me up.
Okay,
I will go down that rabbit hole with you anytime.
I've needed this relationship my whole life.
Glad this could be a therapy session for you to get your hypotheticals out.
Yes.
Been needing this kind of a relief in your life forever. And now you won't run into this problem your first year of marriage. Like this would have been your obstacle taken care of.
Oh, yeah.
Now you're good.
There you go.
I feel great.
Now you can change your last name. You can commit. It's all good. You're fine.
I have someone else to dive into the hypotheticals with.
Yes. So besides loving hypotheticals, tell everyone, like, if they don't really know a lot about you, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. So I don't even know where to start. So I grew up in Michigan. We talked about that. I've always worked in the creative world. So first it was hair school, and then that kind of launched me into like content, which launched me into like Fashion Week and getting more involved with fashion. And then that sort of led me into influencing. And you also have to remember, this is like the time, like at the time in 2013, everyone was an influencer. Well, actually no one was, but like everyone wanted to be. Now it's so different. But
totally.
You were the cool one actually doing it.
Sort of.
But you're like an
cool.
OG.
I kind of honestly was, but I never like picked up on it the way other people did. Like I never quite figured out how to like market the way they did. So, I mean, it was definitely a career. It was something that I actually did like as a business and work. So then that sort of led me into like writing a book about building a brand. And I was pretty heavily in the content brand world, a lot of photography. So then I picked that up because I do love photography. So I started doing photography, and then I started working in education, and it honestly is just this little snowball that all honestly, in my opinion, led to now the clothing line. And there's so many facets of like the things that I've done, but it's all creative and it's all in the same realm. And I did have a clothing line, like a formal wear, sort of like church clothes really, but in 2019. Okay. And that was kind of my first taste of like having a collection. And I only did that because I had a lot of followers at the time that I was like, I could sell them something. Like, they'd probably buy this. Yeah. And so it was sort of...
buy anything I make. Great.
Well, it's kind of like an influencing. It is sort of like, oh, I could produce something that I already know I have an audience.
And you make something good that they'd actually like. Obviously, not just peddling junk that you're like, oh, they'll eat it up.
I'm like Shein with my logo. No. So, like, I hand designed it all, and I did that whole thing that I'm basically doing now. So it's really been all encompassing, but then that sort of led me to getting a little bit of a taste of the fashion, but I was still like going to Fashion Week and like still kind of in that world. And then I had a bit of a battle where it's like, what am I doing? Is this healthy? How invested am I in this type of an environment? It's very like materialistic. It's very unhealthy. Social media is like the most unhealthy place.
Oh yeah.
And like Fashion Week, and like I said, I was involved in so many aspects of the creative world that it got to a place where I started to feel like not healthy, honestly, just so unhealthy. So I went home for a year, and I just like
went home from where?
I was in Scottsdale at the time. Okay. In Arizona, yeah.
Cool.
So I went home for like a year, and I just like decompressed, and it was like, my parents have a lot of land and woods, and I joke, but I just like sat in the woods for a year. Not really, but I did kind of just took a year, and like I like truly had to reconnect. And I think even spiritually, it is so hard when you're go. It's like, yeah, you can still be like active in church, but not really intentional. Like I was so busy, and there was so much pull to this and to that I felt like very ungrounded. And so I think it helped me sort of spiritually recommit and reconnect, which was really, really powerful. And so then
So was that like 2020 you were doing that? So like during COVID lockdown, you were just out in the woods?
Kind
chilling.
of. I mean, it was almost, it was like 2021. It was like
okay.
halfway through 2020, but it was. I mean, that was kind of the time, and I honestly think COVID was in that way impactful for me, where I was just like, it almost gave me an excuse to just leave everything.
Yeah.
And I did, and I stopped influencing, and I haven't gone back. And so that's sort of where I was at, but then I'm like, what am I going to do now? And prayed about it and all these things, and I just kept having this feeling that I needed to come to Utah, and there was a lot of mixed feelings for me about moving to Utah, but I finally just did it. And then I met my husband a year later, and so then we got married, and then I was in a space where I'm like, okay, what's next? I feel like as a person, I'm always digging for like depth. Like everything has to have meaning to me.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why I like hypotheticals. But like everything has to have meaning, where it's like, am I making a difference? And so finally I just was like, you know what? I want to go back and do what I love, but I want to do it in a way that I love it. And so the clothing line is really where that came. Because it was like, what do I wish existed? That's always a question that I ask myself in business, is like, what do I want to exist? And I was like, you know, I would love to be able to find some modest clothes once in a while.
Yes, like that's the understatement of the century.
And I think it all just kind of came to me as a business plan, but maybe spiritually, I don't know. I try not to chalk everything up to like, oh, I just felt, you know, sometimes I think you have intuition. So I don't ever want to be like, oh, I just felt like God told me. I don't know, you know, but I definitely felt like this is a problem. All my friends, everyone I've ever known within the community is like, oh, it's so hard to find clothes that we can wear. And I have felt that very heavily. So I was like, you know what, maybe I want to start doing that. And then I asked my husband, I'm like, I want to do this. And I've done it before, so I had the experience of it. But no one's done it quite in the way that I did it. Like from scratch, building something, not wholesale. It's wild. I like still can't even believe that I did it. I like don't even know how. But so yeah, that's kind of where the clothing line all started. So it's always been creative world. I mean, I have a lot of like interest in all of that, and so I think it was hard for me because I wanted to still be involved in that, but not the side of it that was unhealthy for me, and not the side of it that was like making me feel like if I didn't get Botox and fillers and I was ugly, and not the world where it's like if I wasn't wearing $5,000 bags, I would like, you do get to a point in that career when you're focusing in that industry where everything is like not enough. And I was like, I don't want to feel that way, but I still want to be a part of it. I still want to be involved in fashion, and I love clothes and apparel, and we have to wear clothes. So it's like, that's the big thing too, is there's a lot of misconception of like materialism with fashion, but I'm like, well, what else? You have to wear something,
right?
You know, you have like, we have to wear clothes. Yeah. So it was like, that's kind of where I
start a nudist colony in the woods.
Right. Like
back to your roots in the woods.
And that's
just live that way.
That's kind of where that connection was for me, because it was like, oh, it always just felt like, is this me getting too much into that materialism and just, you know, I was so heavily involved in that it just made me so leery of getting back into it. But I'm like, no, this is something that is beneficial and is helpful, and it's still allowing me to be creative and do what I love, but in a way that's meaningful, which I think is just the perfect recipe. So yeah, that's really start to finish. I mean, there's obviously lots of different things in the mix of that, but for the most part, that's where it all came to be. So I think it's been a lot of trial and error. I think sometimes when we see people starting a business or doing something that we're like, oh wow, that's interesting, you have no idea how much. Like I've done so many years of like,
you just like made some clothes and they just like sold and it was done, right? That's it.
Yeah.
It was easy.
I literally was like, okay, I had this line and it was like, that was fun. But I think that helped me have the confidence. Like at the time I was just doing it as like a fun thing.
Yeah.
But it gave me the confidence to be like, oh, I knew how to do that and I successfully did it. I mean, the scale I've done it on now is so different. So that's been harder. But
yeah,
honestly, I think that's really what helped me to feel like I could do it. And then I learned my lesson because it was like more high-end, like formal wear, skirts, gowns, sequins. And that also taught me that like there were a lot of people that were interested in the concept but not interested in sequins. So that helped me with this clothing line to be like, why don't we do basics?
Yeah.
Like the basic tee I gave you. Like things everyone can wear a t-shirt. And you know, that was a lesson. I think if I hadn't done that, this collection would be over the top, just like I always I always go over the top. And it would be so elaborate and like high-end couture. And I think long-term that would be cool. I'd love to be on runway. I'd love to go to New York Fashion Week, London Fashion Week. I've been there, but it would be cool to go with my own collection. And then I think is the time to build stuff that's like a little bit high-end. But there's just not enough representation of conservative clothing. And conservative clothing does not mean Mormon. It doesn't mean like, that's where I get so conflicted, because it's like, I think because growing up in the church, people just assume like, oh, that's why you dress modestly, or it's because of the church that you do. But I'm like, there is a huge community of people outside of the church that want to dress conservative, and mass manufacturing of clothing has made it almost impossible. I mean, all of the fast fashion, most of the stores, and you probably have experiences where you're like picking and choosing, and you like go into a store and you're like, I can wear 3 things in this whole entire like H&M. I'm like, I can wear 3 things, and I don't even know if I like those 3 things, but I can wear them. These are my options.
I guess I'm gonna buy it because it's all that is available.
And then it's like, what if you want to have your own style but you can't? And you know, and I love that there are some companies, you know, within Utah, I've seen a few coming out with more clothing, but it's like kind of branded in a certain way.
It's all the same. Yes. Like I feel like every girl in Utah dresses the same, but it's like what else are we supposed to wear? Like it's so hard to have an individual style when you're also trying to dress modestly because of the options. So,
and that's what led me to being like I just started sewing my own clothes initially, because I was like,
I wish I could do that.
My mom taught me how to sew when I was young, and so I started just sewing I should have probably brought this up earlier, but I first started sewing because it was like, okay, well, if I can't wear this, I would take stuff and I would modify it.
Oh, I love
stuff,
that.
Take stuff away.
There you go.
And then that's kind of how I got that itch for being like, apparel. Because I've never been to fashion school. My mom taught me how to sew on an $84 sewing machine.
Oh my gosh.
And I still sew on, not that one, but pretty much the same thing. And so for me, it was just saying, okay, if this doesn't exist, then I'm just going to create it. But then it was like, okay, but then I'm seeing this community of people being like the same frustration. So it's like, well, what if I could create that for them? And not everyone can sew their own clothing. Right. And so that's kind of where it was like, my personality comes into play, and I really am the type that's like, if you want something done, do it.
Yeah. No, see, I love that about you, because I feel like how often are we just sitting around complaining about a problem and not doing anything about it, but you're out here like with your sewing machine, like, let's do this.
I know. I'm like, okay, let's make it. And I think that that's something that with my personality is very true to me with the clothing line is I'm very solution focused.
Yeah.
Sometimes to a fault, like if my friends are like, telling me about their problems, I'm like, well, what's the solution? And they're like, I don't know. And I'm like, well, they're
like, just listen to me.
Yes, I'm like, problem solution. So it was like, I kept feeling this way. So it's like, okay, the solution is to make my own clothes.
Yeah.
And then the solution is to make my own clothes that other people can wear and sell. And I think that was helpful, because I've worked in the fashion industry and just been involved in it long enough in the creative world and the hair world and makeup world and all that. I think it helped me to see a lot of like how it's done, but also how it can be done differently, if that makes sense. Like, I think it's like I didn't know what I didn't know. So it's like there's probably designers out there that would have seen my process start to finish and been like, you made that way harder than you needed to be. Or, you know, like from scratch, like hand sketching everything, taking it to a pattern maker, hiring a local girl, you know, well above minimum wage to sew it for me.
Yeah.
And then sew, you know, 500 of them. And so I think that's where so many people be like, go to manufacturing. But I'm like, I don't want to go to manufacturing, or go overseas. And I didn't want to go overseas. Like, I want it to be here and something that I can oversee. And it's my, like, I hand sketch these. Like, I want to see that process. So,
oh, so cool.
It's so different. I've never seen that done yet. And I think that's where, for me, the heart is in it, is that it's not just, okay, is this something that I can fill this need in a business way, but it's truly something that I allow to be a creative process for myself. Now, my profit margins are not near what someone's would be if they went overseas, but that's something that I'm willing to live with for the sake of the standards of the clothing line that I have for myself. And so that's why I always say it's a clothing line inspired by standards, because it's a standard of manufacturing, a standard of ethics, but also a standard of dress and how we dress.
Wow, that's beautiful. I love that. And so you call it, you know, a conservative clothing line. Is there a reason you said like you go with conservative rather than modest? Because I feel like with a lot of the Utah boutiques, it's like modest fashion, modest clothing.
Yeah, that's why.
Yeah. just to differentiate. No, I love it. It's cool.
I don't want to be like those girls. So.
I truly do think that I played around with it. I looked up the word for modest so many ways. There was like non-revealing. I actually liked that one. I think modest has such a affiliation. I mean, conservative sort of does as well politically, and it has nothing to do with politics.
But not clothes.
But I know sometimes at first I was like, does this look like it's like Republican? Like, no, I'm talking about the nature of being conservative. So modesty, that was really hard to find a word, because modesty is a trigger word for a lot of people. And I also think modesty is so closely identified with the church. And I think people have expectations when they see that, and people think they're going to see something, and there's such a heavy influence already with that word. It's a powerful word, and a lot of people have strong feelings when you say that. Not that conservative is any better, but for me it was like, I still use like modest hashtags, but for me it was like, can we use a word that sort of means the same thing but maybe can pave our own way of something a little bit different than what we already have seen. I thought about switching to like unrevealing, like non-revealing clothing. I think that maybe is a little bit more.
That's cool too.
It's just hard like to hear it out loud. Just sounds a little bit different. So we're not even set in stone on conservative clothing line. It's just modest felt way too affiliated already, especially that I'm in Utah doing it. I just don't want people like, oh, it's like down east. It's just, I don't, there's so much affiliation, positive or negative.
Yeah.
And I wanted to sort of pave my own way and have a different word for it.
No, and that's great
hard,
because
though.
I love what you said about like it's not just for members. Like there's so many people in the world who choose to dress more conservatively for their own belief or their own like whatever reason they have. Like I have so many people who follow me because occasionally I'll do like modest outfit ideas, and people are like, I'm not a member of your church, but I love this and I just choose to dress this way too. So I love that you're representing those people as well, because as isolated as we feel as members, like we have our community all trying to do it, and we have our own like modest Utah boutiques, but these people probably feel very isolated as well. So
I love that was a focus for me too, was to try and have not as much like church affiliation where it's like, oh, this is for Mormons or LDS, you don't want people to feel like, I don't know, and I won't say a single name, but there are clothing lines in Utah where it's like, if you were not Mormon, you would not step foot in there.
Oh, for
sure. Let's be honest.
Yep.
And so
I know what ones you're.
Yes, and that's why I'm like, I don't want any. I love them all. I support them all, but I don't. I think that's where I wanted to be a little bit different, where it's not something that's like so branded to the church that I'm using it as a marketing technique.
Yes.
I want it to be something that's like, no, this is just conservative wear. I don't care what religion you are. You could be 90, you could be 16. You know, I wanted to create that a little bit more diversity within it.
Yeah.
And I think because the styles aren't what we see as affiliated with, I don't know, let's just say it. There is definitely like a Mormon style. There is, especially in Utah. It's like you see someone and you're like, I know where you got that. It's like there's so much branding, and it's so wild that a community of people in the fashion world have their own style.
I want to go into this too because, we talked about how sometimes you walk in a store and you're like, wow, there are 3 things that I can wear. Do you ever get discouraged when you're out shopping for modest clothes? And how do you deal with that?
Every time I shop, I get discouraged.
Same.
I actually hate shopping. Honestly, the way I dealt with that was I started a clothing line.
I was going to say, how much of the clothing you wear is stuff that you've made versus how much do you actually just buy and wear?
The goal is to be 100%. Right now, I'm not super... Ooh. I can make some things very well. So like skirts, 100% of the time. But like tops, I'm not super great at. Dresses, maybe 50-50. And so like denim, things like that, I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah.
But the goal is to have everything that I wear I've designed, or like 90%. But I'd say now it's probably... now that the collection's launching, probably 50-50. But I'd like it to be like 80.
That's so cool.
I don't even understand your problems shopping anymore. Because if I want something, I just make it.
Well, wouldn't this be cute with
something like that? I'll just put it together and I'm all set.
Honestly, though, I feel like...
That's the solution now. If you don't like shopping, make your own clothes.
Yeah, or buy mine, because I'm trying. I'm helping you out. I'm trying. I agree, though. The frustration is real. And I honestly think, especially when you become endowed in the church, especially when your standards, even if you have standards, they do have to shift a little. That's where I think a lot of people have.
You're saying when you start wearing garments?
Yeah.
Yep. 100%.
I think that's what's hard for all of my friends. It was like I seriously think every single one of them was like, oh my gosh, after I got married, I had to throw all my clothes away.
Literally.
And I'm like,
so hard.
And they were already trying to dress modestly before that. But it's such a hard particular thing.
There's so many things I had that I'm like, this is modest. And then I tried it on with my garments and I'm like, I have to donate this because it didn't fit right. It was see-through. There's things you don't expect before you're actually wearing it. Do you have any tips for like transitioning into garments as far as modest clothes go?
Well, trial and error. I think for me, I went on a mission. I will say there's a difference.
Like a hard transition, like immediate cutoff for you.
Yes, there's a difference when you go on a mission because then you're wearing church clothes for a year and a half and it's much easier. Skirts were tricky, but when I went on my mission, I felt like it was like a lot of short skirts were super in. And so I felt like it was hard to find longer skirts. And so there were some that I would just make. But at the end of the day, it's like you have one problem, a skirt and a shirt, a dress. But when I got back, it was like, oh, I literally wore church clothes for probably like 6 months after I got home. And my grandma was like, are you just going to wear dresses forever? I'm like,
I don't know. Your grandma called you out.
My grandmother's a fashion queen. And she literally was like, she had told my mom, she was like, have you noticed how kind of dresses like a grandma? As my own grandmother.
You know she makes me look bad.
My own grandmother.
Stop.
And my mom was like, well, I just think she likes dresses. And she's like, okay. So I did have that transition, but I do think there was a buffer for me.
Yeah.
I think getting in doubt and then switching that fast in like normal society is hard. The tips that I have is honestly, and I know it's like, the hard line is what's difficult because you can be dressing modest, more conservatively, unrevealing. And then all of a sudden now it doesn't matter if it's, you know, before it's like, okay, it's half an inch shorter or whatever. It's a little shorter on the knee. Like there's no church police, you know?
Yeah.
But.
Well, in some words.
Some women have taken that upon themselves to be the
church
police.
You know what's funny? I've never experienced that. Maybe I don't care.
Oh, that's great.
Maybe I don't. I just feel like I've never like. I think part of it is personality. Like, I think if someone came up to me, I would actually say, I don't care. Like, those would be words out of my mouth.
Yeah.
So I think sometimes you have to set that line where it's like, oh, this person in church, like, made me feel bad. That can be hurtful. I understand that. But for me, a lot of times I have actively been like, oh, that's really interesting, but that actually is of no interest to me.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
Like, imagine saying that. And then they're like, you can be polite, but then they're like, oh. Like, well, you should. And it's like, well, we all should be doing a lot as, you know, Dr. Pepper, you know, that's like.
Yes. No, I need to take a page out of your book because I would like.
You're drinking a 72-ounce dirty Dr. Pepper. I mean, would you ever know? Because it's petty and that's not Christ-like. But I really think a lot of it is the black and white of saying, well, we're all working on things. Mm-hmm. And I think the judgment within the church, especially with women's clothing, is that it's really gotten to a place where, you know, you never want to make people feel bad about themselves. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why sometimes I think it's like a little bit of an older generation to like comment on someone's clothes.
Yeah.
I just could not imagine in a million years even like noticing what someone else is wearing at church. I don't even think I pay attention. But I do think there is definitely.
From like, is that modest or not? I mean, you're looking at their clothes, right? And being like, oh, should I put that in my collection? Should I make something like that? Or you literally just don't even notice other people's clothes?
Am I selfish? I feel like I don't care about anyone's.
Wow. Because I would have just assumed like, oh, every time you're out, like that's what you focus on.
Everyone at church is modest.
Yeah, no, I mean, everyone needs to be more like that.
I've never seen someone have been like, oh, that skirt is short in church. I've never ever thought that.
That's good for you.
Like, I didn't know that was something people
I feel like sometimes it's like because I know how garments fit on me, I'll notice. Like if someone's wearing like a tank top, I'm like, oh, they're probably not wearing their garments. I think it's more, and I think that's normal for other people to have that thought. It's just what you do next, right? It's like that subconscious, because that's the thing with the church. And I've probably talked to someone about this on the podcast before, but because there are set standards that we know everyone's asked to live, it's kind of noticeable if people aren't. And that's okay, I think, to like have that instinct.
I think I see that more on social media.
Yes. No, I would agree with you.
Because at church, I feel like even people who don't wear their garments ever always wear them for church.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're ever gonna wear them, that's the time.
Like I feel like I've never like seen someone at church. Maybe I truly don't.
Or
care.
like maybe like a investigator, and they wore something because they don't wear garments, or they're not informed about modesty standards within the church. That could be another scenario.
That's true. Because on my mission, sometimes we would bring girls to church, and I'm like, well.
Yeah. Like, oops.
She's like, wearing like
no one says anything.
Like she's wearing like a party dress, and I'm like, well.
Yeah, that was an interesting one. When we would bring a woman to church, and the bishop was like, "Hey, you should talk to her about this." I'm like, two 19-year-old guys are gonna tell this woman what to wear to church? Like, I think we should get someone else to have that conversation.
That's a good call.
That is so funny. I honestly feel like I think it depends. I think if they're like coming into baptism, then it's like, okay, maybe we have a conversation about what people wear. But I've never had a bishop or anyone ever like an investigator where they were like, I feel like they're always just like, oh, we're glad they're here. I think there's a difference though between like, oh, they're wearing something that's like a party dress, and then like, is this actually a level of inappropriate that's like something that needs addressed? I've never seen that.
That's great.
I feel like I have a completely different experience. But I do think I talk to friends sometimes, and they'll bring things up about the church, and I'm like, I have never experienced that.
Totally.
And I don't know like why. I think part of it is not saying that they do, but I do think you'll see sometimes you'll find you'll look for.
You find what you're looking for.
Yes, I think sometimes you find what you're looking for. So if you're looking for people not wearing their garments, you'll definitely find them.
Totally.
But it's like, I don't know. I don't think I care that much about what people do. I do think on social media, the only reason on social media that I think it bothers me, then this is just full transparency, when there's a lot of like so many LDS influencers, I think sometimes it bothers me because not now, but I think I used to, like you're trying to find someone to look up to. Especially when you're young, and especially when you're new and you're maybe even first wearing garments. It's like, oh, here's a fashion influencer who's a part of the church, married in the temple.
This is going to be perfect for me.
This is someone who I can follow and get advice from. So that's where it was like, okay, she's clearly not wearing her garments. Should I judge her? No. But I just was kind of hoping for someone that, shares that they're a member of the church and shares a lot about their faith. Because there's a difference between someone on social media sharing their faith and someone who's like, that's my faith, but this is my business. This is my social media. It's not the same. That's not for me to judge. But I think it's when people are so actively sharing about their religion. Right. And then you're like, oh, maybe this could be, I think it's just because I grew up in the Midwest where there was like no members. You're always like seeking people to look up to as a young girl. And I think for me, and even in my early 20s, it was just like, oh, maybe I could follow her and she would have good fashion advice because I'm looking for fashion advice because I have no clue what I'm doing. And then when they're not, I think that's when it's like, oh, okay. Not that you should judge, but that's when I notice it where it's like, I can't wear that. I can't wear that. Why is she wearing that? I thought we were the same, you know? So it doesn't have to come from a place of judgment, but there can be a place where you're like, oh, I was hoping to look up to. Yeah. Maybe not even up to. Maybe that's not the right word, but they
could be a resource for you.
Yes, because how many times are you like, what do I wear? I mean, there are times where I'm like, like I said, when I got back from my mission and just was like shopping, I'm like, I can't wear anything. And it's like, what do you do? Compromise standards? I mean, or you wear the same exact thing every day. Like jeans and a t-shirt every day. Yeah. Or you dress one exact way. And that's where so much of that frustration has been fueled for so long for me that it was like, okay, I'm just going to do this. But I do think the judging, wearing the garments, it's so out of control. But I also think there are people who you're advertising that you're a member of the church and fashion. I think it's okay when people are like, oh, I can't wear anything she posts. I thought we were like maybe gonna have a little connection.
Yeah, and I think there's a definite distinction, like you said, between like an influencer who just happens to be LDS versus like an LDS content creator. That's what they're posting about, because I get messages.
And you happen to know their religion is different. Yeah. Yeah,
and I get messages all the time from people who are like, thank you for actually wearing your garments. You're one of the only LDS content creators who actually does. And I'm like, well, or they'll like straight up just message me like, how come this influencer is not wearing their garments? Wasn't she married in the temple? And I'm like, well, and I did a video about it once, and I'm like, you know what? Like, it's not our place to judge, obviously, but it is. I do see the frustration where it's like they are marketing themselves as a member. And then some people, whether it's garments or other things, if they're actively promoting things that aren't encouraged within the church. It's just difficult. And I see why that is frustrating to people. And myself, I've even been frustrated by that as well.
Oh, totally.
I think one thing too, we need to be so careful of too, is just how, like, where we put influencers. I mean, I think I look up to so many too, and I think that's totally fine. It's just, how far does that go? Because we never want to use what influencers do or do not do as a justification for what we do. Like, if I'm seeing an LDS influencer who I love and respect and look up to, and I'm like, oh, she's not wearing her garments for her maternity photo shoot, maybe I don't have to wear mine, because then I could wear that cute robe. You know how they all do. So I think it's interesting. I've heard a lot of people saying, or maybe not even saying or admitting it, but like, I feel like using that as
influences your standards rather than
it's
deciding your standards and finding influencers that match that.
Right.
Well, and I think when people are influencers, I mean, it is a mini celebrity status. And I think there was always that controversy of like, well, I'm not asking for people, but it's like, but you also are though.
Right. You are. You have a responsibility.
You are. And I agree with you. And I think that's an important distinction. There's someone who's actively sharing their faith, actively promoting a lifestyle that is, or like sharing about their faith, and then someone who's just happens to be an influencer that you just know their religion because you know a friend or know someone who knows them. There is a big difference of that, but I definitely think it is hard when you're especially young. And I think within the church, maybe it was just me, but growing up, it's like always looking at that age, and even in like your early 20s, and maybe even now, I think anytime, it's like you're always kind of looking for someone that you can look up to a little bit, and maybe not, like you said, up to, like, you know, you shouldn't put them on a pedestal, but the reality is, you know, if you have a sense of style or you want to know what to wear, it's kind of like, I associate it with coming home from a mission. And I know now they have like a transition program, but at the time it was like, Godspeed. And you're like, you get home and you're like, I'm an alien. I have no idea what I'm doing. And I honestly struggled so bad when I got home, because it was like, I don't know what to wear. I don't know what to eat. I don't know who controls my schedule. And I know the church since has put out, like, they actually have a program I think you go through now when you're about to go home. They have something where you like, here's how you can get a job. I don't know. I know that the church has that now, like the post-mission MTC type of a thing, which is so needed. I kind of feel that way about endowments and garments, because it's like, same thing. It's like, Godspeed, have fun shopping. And no one tells you. So I think a lot of people, they look to influencers, they look to people that are LDS, and it's like, what are you wearing? What are you wearing?
Right.
And that's natural to be like, they're like, oh, I don't wear them. And you're like, oh, okay. Well, I was trying to wear them. So I think that's where we do sort of look for people. And I think it's just a community thing. I don't think it's like, oh, I'm looking for someone to idolize.
Totally.
It's a community. You want to find someone where you're like, oh, I can wear what they are wearing, and I can look to them. And it's not even about like fashion advice. I think sometimes it's just like, where are you shopping? Like, where are you finding this stuff?
And it's just like knowing you're not alone in it, because it can be so isolating.
Yeah. Especially when you have friends where they're like, just don't wear them, or who cares? And it's like, oh, and my mom is so different. She's so like, I've never met someone who's more diligent about always. And growing up, it was like this idea. And then I think now it's like this concept where people are like, oh, you don't have to wear them. Like, I actually have friends that are like, it's fine, just wear them on Sunday. Or and I think that's what's difficult about that, is it's like, it's this thing that no one should be judging people for. Nobody should give someone else opinions on their garments. I mean, it's literally like, it's underwear. Like, would you go to your friend and be like, you don't have to wear under? I don't know. Sometimes I'm like, it is at the same time, it is still your undergarments. So it's like, it would be the same as people that are having opinions about anything that you wear that no one sees. Like, why are you giving opinions on that?
Yeah. But even more because it's also like sacred, and it's like a covenant between you and God.
Yes. And then people are like,
you got in that random lady on the street who has to put her 2 cents in.
Right. And that's why I think it's I always say it's so careful. You have to be so careful not to judge that. But I don't know. I also think.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Oh, you're fine. I was just going to say, I think that's why a lot of it is just you're looking for a community. And I think there are people who are really diligent about it. But, and I don't want to be canceled for saying this, but it's generally not the younger generation. It's like my mom is so diligent. My grandma, my aunts, like, they were so good about it. But like the generations after that, like our generation, the younger ones, in my experience within my friends or community, they're like, It was like my mom was like, it was just like, you never didn't wear them. But now people don't. And it's not for us to judge, but it does make it harder to find people that you can be like, I mean, unless it's like, you know, love my mom, love my grandma, love my aunts, but you're kind of
not your fashion.
Yes, you're trying someone relatable, I think is the hardest part. And that's what people are seeking, which is why the judgment comes out. Yeah. And I don't think it should, but I do think it's natural just to be like, oh, I was trying to kind of hope we could find community and you could help me with that and find clothes. And then it turns out that they don't wear them. And that's where you're like, oh, well, you shouldn't judge them, but it is okay to be like, oh, I was hoping, we could, I don't want to say commiserate. That is not a word I want to say, but we could build community around it and support each other.
Absolutely. So we talked about like how sometimes dressing modestly can be a challenge when it comes to, finding clothes that work. We can't all be you and be like master seamstresses and like make our own clothes. And we talk about how some people are choosing to wear them less or less often. Since it's sometimes a struggle, like why do you choose to dress modestly?
It's hard to say because there's influence of the church, obviously. But something that I try and do in everything within the church is I always try and build my own personal conviction of it. So there's so many aspects of the church, so many things. And modesty has always been one that it's a struggle, I think, for everybody. But I think finding my own personal conviction, it's always been based on how it's made me feel. And I think that's a really powerful compass to follow, is like, how do you feel when you're wearing certain things? And so for me, even just going back in my life, I can see times where it was like, when I was wearing this, that's how I felt. When I was wearing this, that's how I felt. And that's where modesty came into play with me, because the church or not, there's so much like, oh, if you weren't Mormon or LDS, you wouldn't wear that. And I do think it's true. Would I wear things exactly the way I wear them? Maybe not. But there is a hard line with that maybe doesn't exist always. But for me, it's always been, how does it make me feel? And so, and I've said this before, I really believe that fashion is a feeling and it's a creative expression. It's an expression of yourself, and modesty is a motive. What is your motive when you're wearing what you're wearing? And that's why we can't judge people for modesty, because we don't know their hearts. We don't know what they're thinking. We don't know why they're wearing what they're wearing. And it's an internal thing, because if you ask yourself, why am I putting this on? Why am I wearing this? You'll get your answer, and you'll find some insecurities in there. You'll find some motives that you're like, oh, and that's not for me to tell someone, oh, she's dressing modest because she's, insecure. That could not be true, but that's why motive is personal and modesty is personal. And that's why we can't judge people. We can't assume, because there are religions in other countries where make LDS people look immodest.
Yeah.
I mean, there's the modesty is so subjective. Within the church, we have a little bit of a more strict line with modesty, but there's a lot of women who are extremely modest who don't wear cap sleeves,
Yeah.
So I think that's why, for me, it's always been the feeling. How does it make me feel about myself? And when I think about dressing modestly, what's the motive behind what you're wearing? You'll find a lot more of, even just like, it changes day to day. Like if you're wearing something that's, baggy sweatpants and those types of things, it's more like hiding yourself. It's a comfort thing. It's like more of a comfort. We can't eliminate the feeling out of clothing. We just can't. What you wear is always going to represent how you feel. And so I think that's why when you think about the motive of wearing something, when you're putting something on, are you trying to gain attention? Are you trying to sexualize yourself? If you're trying to do that, like, that is your motivation. And that's fine if you want to do that. But that is where the motivation is coming from. And so when you really want to ask yourself, am I dressing modestly? And in all honesty, like, modesty to me is just not over-sexualizing your body is like it. And there's such a wide variety. Some people think crop tops are. Some people think they're not. There's so many gray areas of that. And that's why I think you have to go internal. When thinking about how does this make me feel, I think that's really where you're going to find that motive. And if I'm wearing something that's showcasing a little bit of creativity, but also showcasing me in a more professional way, in my opinion, it's like, okay, you're not sexualizing your body. Like, that's more modest. But I think this hard line in the scale of modesty is so wide.
Yeah.
There are people who wear like modest clothing that's just professional dress, but within like the church, people might say, oh, that's not modest. But then in other countries or other places, it's perfectly modest. Or like I said, there's places where showing skin at all is immodest. I mean, it's just, there's such a wide variety. So for us to say, within the church, we follow a guideline, but that's not the guideline for everybody.
And even within the church, that's changed over the years.
Garments have changed.
Garments used to go.
They're shorter. They're longer. There is so much subjectiveness. And that's why even within the church, within the Strength of Youth, they took out, it used to say, this is modest, this isn't modest. And now it doesn't. It says, I don't really know exactly what it says, but it basically is like, how do you feel when you wear things? Wear things that honor your body. And I think the church was really onto something when they did that, because it follows sort of this spirit of the law.
Yeah, it might have been inspired or something.
Yeah. Maybe. Who knows? But it is. It's like, what's the motive? Teaching women not just don't wear this because we're telling you not to.
Right.
How do you feel when you wear that? And that sets them up for, if they do decide to become endowed, which is fully a choice that they have to make, then they're setting themselves up where they've already gotten used to saying, okay, this is how I feel when I wear this. And I think that's why when we just pretend there's no feeling in fashion and you can wear anything and it doesn't have any feelings, that's false. It's just so not true.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people try and dispel this belief that fashion has any influence on how you feel, how other people look at you. And that's not true. It's just not. And there's no way to dispel that, because it's psychologically true.
Yeah.
And I think when we can look at the motive of what we're wearing in fashion, I know the church, it's a little more garment, like that's the line. But, and I think that's where people get a little bit confused. But I think for me, it's just about the motive, because there's so many ways you could dress, and how you're feeling when you're wearing certain things, I think tells you everything. And also why we can't judge people, because we have no clue.
Right.
There's obviously things where it's like, okay, they're not even wearing clothes. Like, that is different. But I want to say too, I think there's so much controversy where people are saying like, oh, well, a woman should be able to basically wear no clothes and it should have no impact on a male's brain or a woman's brain or anyone's brain. And I do agree, but I also think people say, oh, we over-sexualize things. And I agree with that, but we are in an over-sexualized world. And so we are a part of this world. So we do have to live with that world. Adam and Eve were naked. There was like no, because they're like kids. It's like kids don't have that concept, but we're not kids. We're developed adults, post-puberty. And I think that's where we have to be so careful that we don't say, oh, well, if everybody just didn't have a dirty mind, I could wear what I wear. But they don't. You have to live more offensively.
Yeah.
And I think that's where there's so much of like men controlling things and all that stuff. And I do think there is, I've never heard that before in my whole life of the church, but I do think that's a huge misconception that we believe that. But I do think from like a Christ-like place, if you have a couple that's dating and they're trying to not pass physical boundaries, would it be nice of you as a fiance to be dressing inappropriate all the time? You know what I mean? Like, oh, well, he shouldn't have any of those thoughts. It's like, but help someone now.
It's not her fault. She didn't cause something bad to happen.
But
it's like, could she help out?
You could help them out. You could. And I think that's where that is so misconstrued, that like we're responsible. It's like, no, but if you're trying to help other people, you know, and I think there's also a lot that's like, well, they never talk about men's fashion. And my husband jokes because he's like, have you seen men's garments? We could not even wear a t-shirt. There's so much men wear suit. Like in the church, it's like you wear suits. They're wearing socks and shoes. And at least we can show our toenails. I mean, really, men's.
Like for guys, the only thing would be if you went like super tight, like crazy tight, or just like not wearing a shirt. That's about it.
Yeah. And I think that's where there's so much. It's like, oh, women, it's all immodest, but for men, it's not. And I'm like, have you seen men's fashion? They don't even make. Like, there's not many immodest options. It's like opposite. For women, it's all immodest. Few pieces that are more conservative, not sexualizing. Men, it's like nothing is sexualizing unless you're seeking out like skin-tight biker shorts and a muscle tee.
Yeah.
Their options, like my husband and I will go shopping, and since I've been married, I'm like, you can wear any of this.
Oh, that's so true.
Any of it. You can literally wear any of this. And he's like, yeah. And then we go into the women's section and he's like, you can wear nothing. So what do? Lower your standards so you can meet that, you know, and that's where the frustration is. But I also think there's a huge misconception that like, oh, we don't talk about men's fashion. I'm like, because we don't need to. There is not a problem within men's fashion. And
it's hard because it's not equal, but that's what it is.
Yes. And I think it's like men also, like I'm just using church as an example. If a man showed up to church in skin-tight biker shorts and the equivalent of what a woman would wear, a skin-tight dress, skin-tight biker shorts, and a skin-tight muscle tee, there would be a conversation. You would shield your child's eyes. And I think that's where it's like, but women, it's almost like we're allowed to be more like that because it's like, don't tell her what to wear. But if a guy wore that at church, everybody would be like, why is that man dressed like that?
Yeah.
It is a double standard, but it's treated like it's not. But it kind of is, because men really are way more, they dress way more conservative, even at church.
Right.
Men's clothing, it's like their shorts are like, it's just naturally, men's clothing does not over-sexualize them.
Right.
Women's like only seems to over-sexualize.
Yeah.
It's so interesting.
It's so interesting. And it just gets me thinking, like, the adversary, like, this was obviously part of his plan, right? And it's to over-sexualize women, and because of the impact that women can make in our role, and our opportunity to become mothers, that, like, I think it's part of it. And it's like, there's that quote by Sherry Dew that's like, the adversary, or no, it was Sister Holland, but anyway, it was like the adversary saying, if I want to attack society, I'm going to attack the women in it, you know? So I think it just kind of leads to that. So it is interesting. It's double standard, but it's like, that's the world that we're in, unfortunately. So super interesting. This has been great, like, talking to you about this. And I feel like it's so relatable and so refreshing just talking about things like this so candidly, because I feel like we don't have conversations like this a lot. So is there anything else surrounding modesty or modest fashion that you want to leave with our viewers?
I think what I would say with viewers, especially as it stems from modesty, is modesty is emotive, so you can't judge other people. I think that's an important aspect of that. But also, you should never lower your standards of modesty because of the world around you. So just because you can't find clothing doesn't mean you shouldn't live your standards. And I think it's easy to do that where we just sort of go with the flow. But if you have a standard, you should always keep that standard, just because it's difficult. And that's why I started a clothing line, learned to sew my own clothes. I'm not saying everybody does that, but I do think that when you're really trying to commit to doing something, there's always a way. God will always provide a way for you to keep your standards, especially when it's rooted in trying to have a better relationship with Him, when it's rooted in trying to be more, respectful of your body and how you're seen and how you're presenting yourself. I think God's always going to help you, and it's so difficult, and it's such a challenge for so many women in the church. Garments and fashion is like so challenging, but it is possible, and I think God will always help you to find a way to make that work, whether He helps you learn how to sew when you have absolutely no talent, like He did with me, or inspiring you to do certain things. I think you just have to be mindful of that, but you should never ever lower your standards just because it's harder and just because it doesn't seem possible, because 100% it always is.
I love that so much, and such a great way to wrap up this conversation, that there is hope. Sometimes it takes more time, more money, which sucks because sometimes these modest boutiques are more expensive, but God will always make a way. You can thrift. You can look for outfit idea on Pinterest. Like, there's always, I love it. You said God will always make a way. So be patient with yourself, be patient with God, and just trying to find it. But if you are committed to dressing modestly, that's what He wants for you, and He'll make it happen. So I love that. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thanks so much for having me.
I am so excited for your clothing line.
Thank you.
So tell us, like, what's next for you? Where can people keep in touch with you?
So I'm trying to be a little less off social media in a personal way. So the clothing line is just Mykel, Mykel clothing. So that's where the launches are happening, and sort of these types of conversations, more of that is all on there. I'm trying to disconnect a little more personally. So that would be the one to follow. And then the clothing line comes out September 23rd.
Yay. So it'll be out by the time this episode is out. So it's out.
Yes, it's out. Yay. You can shop it now.
Oh my God.
It's already all sold out, guys. Sorry. Get it next time.
Honestly, it may be. I hope so. But if it's all sold out, then there's back order, or obviously we'll restock. But yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay. I can't wait. You were talking about that turtleneck. I'm on my way to go order it right now. Thank you so much for being here. This was so great to talk to you.
Thank you so much. Thanks, both of you. So fun.
I know, Eric, I know you had a lot to contribute. Thank you.
Boys, stay modest out there.